right, welcome back to Parenting Porcupines. I say welcome back as if you've been sitting at home binge watching. And of course, you know that's exactly what you've been doing. You've been watching Parenting Porcupines nonstop since you discovered us on YouTube. And you know what? You're welcome back. This is episode 13, and the title of this episode is Immigrants. We get the job done. We should all say that together. Immigrants. We get the job done. Not so good at our in syncness, but that's okay. And it comes out of, like most episodes, it comes out of something that we talked about in the previous episode. And specifically, we're talking about the musical Hamilton. And so real quick, I'll just say I'm Kasie. My daughter is 12. We live here in the Midlands. Melissa, introduce yourself to us.
I'm Melissa. I'm down in the Low Country. I've got 3 kids. They are 5, 7, and 10. Jessica?
I'm Jessica. Sorry. I'm Jessica. I live in the upstate, and I've got 2 boys. They are in the 6th grade and the 3rd grade.
Right on. The purpose of this particular episode is to explain to all of our beautiful followers, likers, sharers, subscribers, you fine people, how we talk to our kids about what has really become a pretty over-politicized topic, which is immigration. And especially now as we're in a political campaign period of time over the course of this year, we're looking at a lot of people using this like a football, right? Where they kick it back and forth. Nobody really wants to take one stand or the other. And as we are libertarians, the Libertarian Party, big L Libertarian Party, is promoting Jo Jorgensen, and Jo Jorgensen has an open borders policy. Her idea is that we should go back to immigration standards that we had early on in our country's founding, which is to make it relatively easy for people to come and to contribute to our society. And so we started thinking about this Hamilton concept, and we thought we would, of course, take advantage of the popularity of the Hamilton musical and the hashtag Hamilton. And we would spend a little bit of time talking about how that has created a bridge for us to talk about what is immigration, what does it mean for people to come to our country, why do they want to come to our country, what opportunities are for them here, and then why politicians, and sometimes our own citizens and neighbors seem to be so anti-immigrant, and specifically coming out of that Hamilton conversation. So I'm going to flip it to Jessica and talk a little bit about this background from Hamilton.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't watched the musical, which is really hard for me to understand, because we watch it at least once a week in our house. Our kids love it. Like Jackson is obsessed with it. He listens to the soundtrack every night. If we're in the car, we're listening to the soundtrack. But in the musical, it's, toward the halfway mark where they're going into the Battle of Yorktown, and Alexander Hamilton and Marquis de Lafayette meet on the battlefield after this period in the story where Hamilton has been sent home by George Washington, and he's spent some time with his wife. And so he's coming back, and he's meeting his friend Lafayette on the battlefield, and they're talking and exchanging pleasantries. And the line is, we're finally on the field. We've had quite the run. Immigrants, we get the job done. And so I love that line, and I love that part of the story because it gives me an opportunity to talk to both of my children, even at the ages that they are, which 12 and 8, to talk about the contributions of immigrants in that very, very early stage of our nation, in the infancy of our nation, and how that would not be possible if our founding fathers had said, no, we're building a wall, or you can't come here, or you can't be part of this because you might be a criminal, or whatever the case may be, So that's kind of, that's the bridge that we've built by using that musical.
And, my understanding of the musical is that, of course, the writer of that musical, Lin Manuel Miranda, his own father, came to the United States, to the states proper, right, from Puerto Rico, which, of course, is a U.S. territory, but he still sort of has this immigrant background. And his first film, The Heights, his first Broadway musical, The Heights, was about an immigrant community in New York City, which is Washington Heights, and is primarily made up of Latino immigrants. And so when we talk about it, too, a lot of our conversation, Holly and I, around Hamilton has been about the, like you said, the contributions. And it's not just what we see, which is the music and the cultural contributions, but a lot of it too is the workforce contributions that these folks make in our society. And there's just this political football about whether or not they have a right to be here, whether or not they have followed the right processes to go through naturalization. And I kind of err on the side of Joe with this, in that we have made it so complicated and we've created so much bureaucracy, and we've built these institutions around ensuring this, system, right? And it's as if we are more obsessed with the system than we are with the outcomes of the system, which are to ensure that people are here, that they're safe, and that they're able to contribute, and that they can become citizens and enjoy the freedoms that are available to them in our country. Instead, we seem to be obsessed with the system and all of the, archaic mechanisms inside of it. One of the questions that Melissa put into our show note, that Jessica put in our show notes, was about our own personal experiences with immigrants here in the United States. And Melissa, you have neighbors that have immigrated here from Latin America. Is that right?
Yes. And their son is at my house all the time. He's always here. But we love Emmanuel. His parents, his dad speaks pretty good English. His mother speaks very little. She speaks Spanish, and I speak very little Spanish. I know a couple words. And so every time I see her, we're waving. But my kids have seen me have conversations with her. We can communicate well enough that, we watch out for each other's kids. She saw me, I was out on the street, my kids had disappeared. But she knew where they were, so she went and got them. And, you help your neighbors out. We jumped their car. She's, but
you're out there going,
¿Dónde
están míos? ¿Dónde están míos? Where are my kids?
I should learn that one.
You just need a few key phrases, Melissa, to be able to communicate with it. I think it's interesting you say that, because one of my good friends I walk with here in our neighborhood, they have Latino neighbors as well. And one of their neighbors, his brother moved down here from upstate New York or something like that, and stayed with him while they were finding a house. They were here, they lived together for about 3 or 4 months, right, while they were finding a place to relocate. Well, recently our Homeowners Association has passed an ordinance, and they put the ordinance in, I know, right? Collective eye roll for the HOA. Can we please? They passed an ordinance related to how many families can live in a single family home, and whether or not you're allowed to bring in boarders, right? And they don't call them that in the ordinance, but essentially what they're saying is they don't want multiple families living in a home. And what she said, her very first response when I said, "Did you see that they sent this out for us to vote on?" She said, "I'm sure they were talking about my neighbors." And it's because that ordinance is a racist ordinance. I mean, it is 100% targeted at Latino families who are willing to offer accommodations for their neighbor, for their friends, for their family, as they're looking for somewhere else to move into. This is not a permanent situation that they were experiencing, but nonetheless, our Homeowners Association feels like there should be an ordinance against that. Even when I mentioned this to a different neighbor, the example that he gave me was that somebody had moved out of their home. They had rented the home to a Latino family. The Latino family had moved multiple families into the home. And I said, you get when you say that out loud how racist it is, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not talking about, because you're not talking about occupancy. You're talking about a specific cultural occupancy.
Well, and the thing about it is that there are many cultures, Spanish cultures being one of those, or Latino cultures, whichever is the correct term. But a lot of those cultures, it is not uncommon for multiple generations, multiple families to live under one roof. It's the same in a lot of Mediterranean cultures. It's the same in a lot of European cultures. I mean, it's not uncommon. My best friend lives in Germany, and she lives in a home. Her grandmother lived there. Her parents lived there. She lived there. I mean, she still lives in that house. Her grandmother passed away a few years ago, but her parents still live there, and she lives there with her husband, and they, they all take care of each other. And I mean, there are so many cultures, so many regions where that is normal. That's what they do culturally.
Mhm.
Multiple
Yes,
generations.
Yes, Americans are the exception to that rule.
Yes.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Probably
right.
why we're such a train wreck.
Because we don't keep our families close, right? Well, but here's the other piece about that, because I remember my Spanish instructor when I was she was from Spain, and she was talking about the limited real estate in Spain. And that's part of the reason that these older European nations have that tradition, is because there is such limited real estate. To your point about your friend that's in Germany, that real estate belongs to a family and they keep it because there's not a whole lot of real estate available. But in freaking the United States, man, we're building brand new houses all the time, right? We're constantly knocking stuff down and building new neighborhoods. So the response here is like, get your own home. It's culturally, like, we're just not that inclusive. Like, we want to talk about being inclusive, but we're just not. And I know I sort of took us down the wrong path here on the homeowners thing, but I think it is a little bit about cultural bias. And I think that Jessica, you made a great point about using Hamilton as a way to explain those cultural differences to our kids, because part of the beauty of Hamilton the musical, specifically in the cast that we get to see on the Disney Plus version, is this beautiful diversity and inclusivity, and the way that our founding fathers are being represented by an America today, a much more diverse America today, featuring Black actors and Latino actors and Puerto Rican actors and this kind of thing. And I love that we can use that version of our storytelling to talk about immigrants, because it shows their tremendous contributions very early on. All right, let's see. And bridge. Because I do want to get back to Hamilton, but I don't want us to start singing, but I can't stop singing in my head right now.
It's hard. It's hard not to sing. It's really hard not to sing. We do it a lot in our house. And actually the other day we were sitting in church and our pastor said, what time is it? That was part of his sermon, was what time is it? It's a time for compassion. It's
your whole family shout, showtime.
I was seriously sitting there like praying silently, like, please don't let my family say showtime. Please don't let my family say instead of saying amen, we're like, showtime.
I promise you my family would not have held back. Like, there's just no way. They can't be trusted. They just can't be trusted.
It did happen once in a restaurant. So anyway,
let's talk about the legality of the immigration side of this, right? Because I think that's the conversation we need to have. How do we, especially in South Carolina, I know the upstate, you guys have a lot more you have a higher Latino population in the upstate. We have a pretty good size here in Columbia, but most of our Latino population is located in West Columbia. There aren't a lot of not a lot of Spanish speakers on our side of town on the Upper East Side. Melissa, what are the demographics like in the Low Country?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
I don't. All I know, the biggest mix of people I see is who my children go to school with.
Right. Yeah. That's a good indication.
And there's, I'd say, there's a lot of Latinos. It's very diverse.
Okay. Because I remember when Charlie was working in Greer, he was working for Discount Tire Company in Greer in the upstate, and he wanted to learn Spanish because a lot of his customers came in and spoke Spanish. And quite a few of the guys that they hired as tire techs spoke Spanish to be able to help those Spanish-speaking customers. So when you think about this Latino population, I wonder, my first question is like, what do people really need to be able to do to come into the country, right? If we were to do the Joe Jorgensen scenario of like open borders, what would that look like? And I'll let you both speak to that. And then the other piece of it is, why do you think there's this fear of immigrants coming into the country? Because it's the drum gets beaten every year. Every time we have a political cycle, somebody beats the drum about immigration and immigrants taking our jobs and immigrants costing us money, putting strain on our systems, right? And they're not talking about the highway system. They're talking about healthcare. They're talking about education, right? So let's start with Melissa with this idea of, what do you think our the basic requirement should be for people to be able to immigrate to our country?
You don't have a criminal record.
Okay. Well, what about
End of
those
list.
countries?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
There
what?
are countries. What about the countries that can't verify? Because there are countries that have very poor record keeping and aren't able to provide immigrants with a clean criminal record.
Hmm.
Should we let them in
don't-
anyway?
I'd like to err on the side of 99% of people are fine and let them in anyway. You know, keep an eye on them for a year. You know.
Yeah, I
Call
think
them every 6 months. Say, have you gotten arrested? No, good. Okay.
the probationary period is not a bad idea, though, right? When you think about somebody comes in, they sign up, and then you're like, all right, cool, check back with us in a year, and we're going to double check and see if you have a criminal record, right?
Yeah.
I don't think
Well,
there's
I
anything wrong
think
with that.
adding to that, it could be, you know, these are the things that as the path to citizenship, because I have a hard time saying that I think people should just be able to come and go willy-nilly, because, you know, because we are a land of opportunity, or at least we pride ourselves in being such. You know, you want to make sure that people are coming here to make contributions, right? And not just live off of whatever system they can. And we can also have a conversation about how ending the nanny state would help alleviate those concerns, but we can save that for a later episode. But I do think that there should be a reasonable path to citizenship, and I don't think it should be burdensome. And I say that with firsthand experience, secondhand rather. My aunt immigrated here from Colombia, South America, about 25 years ago. She and her husband, I think they were architects, maybe, I can't remember, but they were very successful. Their families were very successful. They had things, right? Because they were successful. They also had a daughter. And as we all know, there's a lot of turmoil in that region. And they were receiving threats against their daughter. You know, they wanted, ransom money or whatever. If they didn't get the money, they were going to kidnap her. They were going to do these things. And so they came here because they were worried for their daughter. They were worried for her safety. And so they came here, and then she met my uncle. I can't remember if they divorced after they got here. It doesn't really matter, but they were separated. She met my uncle, and they ended up getting married. But she just recently was able to get her citizenship. She's always worked. When she first came here, she worked on an assembly line starting out, and she worked her way up. She got her teaching certificate. She teaches Spanish, middle school Spanish now. She has for a number of years, but she's always made contributions, right? And she's always helped the community in any way she can. She's been a wonderful addition to our family. We adore her and her daughter. But seeing how difficult it was, the fees and the labor that it takes to become a citizen. And it just seems like it shouldn't take somebody that long to be able to afford it, or to be able to study for it, or to be able to do all of these things. And some of the questions that they have to answer, I mean, these are things that they don't even teach in our schools, and you're expecting someone to sit down and answer these questions. So, we talk about reasonable paths to citizenship and what that should look like. And maybe it is a year probationary period, and you have to keep your nose clean. You can't get arrested. You can't, do whatever things. You have to find a job. You have to show that you have stable employment. You have to show that, that you're making these basic contributions to society. And that should be enough. I mean, if somebody wants to come here, let them come here. I don't understand this idea that we are just this nation that we're so elitist that nobody can join us in our party,
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And I want to build on that a little bit too, because given that there is a particular bend in this country to do more, that have the government do more, we need all the taxpayers we can get, friends. I don't know who they think is going to pay for all this, but my God, why would you close the border and raise taxes, right? This equation, this cannot,
So
I mean, just from from a basic business perspective, like this is not good business, my friend, right? If you need to use taxes to pay for your crazy entitlement programs, you should be bringing in as many taxpayers as you possibly can. But the other thing I think that, Jessica, that you said is possibly the key to this, the linchpin to this, right, is there are people who are coming here for a better life.
Absolutely.
And that should inspire us. That should make us want to have them here. They see things in our country that we don't even see ourselves, that we take for granted here. In the Northern Virginia area, there is a surge in population from Middle Eastern and specifically India, Pakistan, nationalities, right? And they're protective of their own culture, and they tend to be exclusive toward whites, toward Americans, toward, right? And this may be in response to a bias that they have felt from whites. I don't know, but I do know that as friends that I've had that have lived in Northern Virginia have left apartment complexes and then condo complexes and then neighborhoods as the neighborhood became more densely populated with immigrants from the Middle East and from specifically India and Pakistan. And the question I had for these folks as they were leaving is like, why wouldn't you be friends with them? And my white friends who are experiencing this white flight scenario, their response was they don't want to be friends with me. Now, I don't know how true that is. My question is, how do we talk about inclusivity and integration? Because the key here, as we bring immigrants in the door, is a full integration and understanding of what they provide us and what we provide them, so that we're not viewing them as some kind of parasitic infection, but instead we're viewing them as the thing that makes us a richer, better country, right? And so how are we doing that? How are we bending our systems and bending our culture and opening up our doors to invite them to participate instead of putting up blocks and making it difficult and creating animosity between ourselves and them, right? And so I kind of wonder about that. And I always think about coming at this from a position of love. And that would be when we go back to this conversation about how do we teach our children about this. Whenever I talk to Holly about interacting with people that are not like us, that don't look like us, that don't worship like we do, that don't whatever, right? They're different. They're an opportunity to show love, right? Every engagement is an opportunity to show love and to bring that love forward and forefront and be changed by what they can teach you and what they can show you. And I know Alex isn't with us tonight, but that is one of the things that Alex and I talk about all the time in our faith tradition, is this concept of if I come into this conversation from a place of love, I can't go wrong here. But if I come into it from a place of prohibit, this and don't allow that and don't let them this and don't let them that, and we have to protect this, I'm not going to be changed. And I'm only going to create barriers. And I think that's probably where I struggle more than anything with the immigration conversation. I don't understand why we can't let them in. I mean, we can surely party with the Haitians, right? Isn't that the line from Clueless? The line from Clueless where she goes, we can totally party with the Haitians.
Well, and
the more the merrier.
We talked about, you mentioned that they come here for opportunity, they come here for freedom, for all these things, these ideals that Americans hold so dear. And I put it in our notes, and I mentioned it in our Slack channel in the campaign field team last night, or maybe the night before last, but we stopped by and we were visiting with my aunt and uncle. They're about to move, and they found some of my things in their building. So we stopped to pick them up, and we were visiting, and we were talking about the election, and she was talking about how, this is her first election where she gets to cast a vote as an American citizen. And that means a lot to her. It means so much. And she was talking about how frustrated she is with the things that she's seeing in the election cycle between the parties and that sort of thing. And but she was talking about how much it means to her that she gets to cast her vote in an election as an American, and that makes her, proud, and that she takes it very seriously, and that she views that as such a responsibility. And I think it's important that we understand that most immigrants who are working toward that path, working down that path to citizenship, they value those same things that we value, probably even more, because we've become so spoiled and entitled as Americans. Not really us, I don't think, but a lot of Americans have. And it was so exciting to me that my son got to witness that conversation. He got to be part of that conversation. And when we left, he told me how proud he was of her and how excited he was for her. And that, I think that was kind of what really hit home the gravity of it, And I think what really made me think that this conversation that we're having right now, like, this is important. And this is something that our kids need to understand, because there's a whole generation of people right now who are saying, no, you can't come, you can't be here because you're not one of us. But we're raising the next generation, and we want to raise that next generation to say, you know what? You might be the next Alexander Hamilton. You might be the next Lafayette. You might be the next whoever. Come, let's see what you have to give us. Let's do this. Let's collaborate. Let's make this happen, right?
I think the phrase you're looking for is Hercules Mulligan. I need no introduction. When you knock me down, I get the fuck back up again. But I'm just going to put that out there. That might just be a thing. You might not actually be looking for that line. But when you went with okay, so I agree with you.
Hercules is my favorite.
I think he's my favorite too. I think I feel like there should be like a whole spinoff, a Hamilton spinoff that's just the Hercules Mulligan story.
Oh, we're going to talk about the spies. Don't worry, we are going to talk about the spies because I love the spy ring.
Melissa, tell me what you think. First of all, do your kids have questions about immigration? Do they have questions about speaking different languages? Do they have questions about the path to citizenship? Do any of these things come up in conversations with your kids?
No, they do not. My kids, I don't know. They don't find it strange that our neighbors speak a different language than us. That's just how it is. His mom doesn't speak English, whatever. So we go through, his 12-year-old sister is our interpreter. Nice. So anytime we need to communicate, Anna translates for us. But no, my kids have never asked me why they don't speak English or where they're from. It's just how it is. They don't care and have never asked. I don't know why. Now I'm thinking it's weird that they've never asked.
No, but you know what though?
I think that's a sign that they don't see that. Like
I don't think they care.
They don't see that and think, oh, that person's different from me. I'm not going to associate with them. They don't care and they shouldn't, right?
But so I think that's when I grew up in Northern Virginia, I felt the same way. Like as a little kid, like I didn't notice any of that either, right? And so I'm wondering, like, at what point does this become a question, right? When are you taught that there's this other, right? When are you taught that it's not okay to not speak English? When does that show up? Like when do people become indoctrinated about that? Because I feel like growing up, I didn't have a sense of that either, right? And I grew up, like I said, Northern Virginia, in a relatively diverse. It's much more so now, but even at the time, it was relatively diverse because it's right there by the capital, by the nation's capital, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're coming up on 29 minutes, and we normally wrap ourselves up between 30 and 32. So I just want to hit on this last piece about Hamilton, because let's go back to it. There's a Hamilton mixtape, and the Hamilton mixtape has a song called Immigrants, We Get the Job Done. And it includes rap performances in Spanish and some various artists that are contributing to this conversation. To me, I feel that the immigration conversation, when it becomes a political football, creates animosity and creates an us versus them. And I want to know what you think of the role of art in bridging that animosity. So I'm going to throw that to Jessica. What do you think, Jessica? How does art contribute to bridging that gap?
Well, because I think art, I mean, it transcends, right? So like when we talk about Hamilton, since that's kind of what got us to this conversation, because of the diversity of the cast, right? Because of the hip hop soundtrack, because of those things, people can relate to it. And I think that's the beautiful thing about art, is that it doesn't matter how different people are. They can usually find a way to relate to it. And I think in any conversation that you have with someone, when you can find somewhere, some place, some way that you relate, when you find that common ground, when you can meet somebody where they are, and then you go from there, you're always going to end in a better place than where you started. And so I think that Hamilton as a piece of art is so culturally important to us for that reason, because it allows us to pull in people from different ethnicities, from different races, from different backgrounds. And then, I mean, it's not just us, some, 30 and 40 something year old moms talking about Lin Manuel Miranda, how obsessed we are with him, or Daveed Diggs, because quite frankly, I'm totally in love with him.
What? He's amazing. He's just amazing. Yeah, so hands down a God. He's evidence that God loves us.
Yes. But everything, I mean, everybody, like people of all ages, all the way down to, like I said, my kids. I mean, that's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. What do you think, Melissa? Do you think there's a role for art in bridging some of these conversations?
Oh yeah. Art like speaks to human. Like it doesn't matter what kind of human I am. I'm human, so art will speak to you, and it gives you a common language, like someone I have nothing in common with, but we can discuss Hamilton or Clueless, which is my favorite movie. That'd be cool.
We're gonna have to work that into big time show notes on the Clueless side. We're definitely working an episode of Clueless. All right, this has been fantastic. You know what's really great about those last two questions, the questions about how does art bridge this gap, and why I know that the three of us were meant to be, and Alex too. That's exactly what I would have told you to say if I had written the script for the answers to those particular questions. In fact, art does bring people together, and it is the ultimate expression of humanness, right? As opposed to nationality. And so this was only episode 1 of this particular topic. So this is Founding Fatherhood Part 1, Immigrants, We Get the Job Done. But there will be a Founding Fatherhood Part 2, because of course there's a lot to talk about, not just on the immigration conversation, but on the conversation of Hamilton. Duh, which by the way is streaming on Disney Plus. Shameless plug. Go out there and watch it. Also get the show notes on parentingporcupines.com. That's all we have for you on this particular episode. Stream it, love it, like it, subscribe to it, share it with all of your friends. Email us if you have any ideas or questions for this. But of course, go out to facebook.com and send us your love through comments. Thank you, ladies, for being part of this tonight.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
And we'll see you next time.